Good morning, Vietnam. Sorry, I had to try that. And I gotta get my all my stuff going on here. How's everybody doing this morning? I once again, as is like the situation always, I had technical difficulties. Um and so and so yeah, I don't know what's going on. I don't even what is that? What is that? Why are my graphics not here? Jeez Louise. Bubbles? That's not what we're looking for. That's not what we're looking for at all. So I'm here. It's the Painfully Honest Tech Morning Show. I'm going to turn up my headphones a little bit. Yep. Okay. Good. Sounding good. How's everything sounding out there? Yes. Good. Yes. Good. Anyway, how's everybody doing this morning? Whew, what a day. What a day. It is Monday. I just I decided to do the show earlier on Monday because that makes all kinds of sense. But I think I'm going to do the show earlier just in general because Monday earlier means I get to cover the news a little bit earlier, and that's a good thing. Um, yeah, I don't know why the countdown is weird. It's not been weird before. Kieran Kieran wants the old stuff. I love those guys. I love those guys, but I want to do it myself. So it's nothing personal against them at all. It's just I'm more mobile, more agile, more free to do my thing whenever it's just me. Why is this here? Oh my god. My whole setup gremlins came in the middle of the night and messed up my whole setup. Whew. So, yeah, painfully honest daily. Here we are once again. It is Monday, the 5th of April, and this the 20,000th and 21st year of no 2021st year um, of the what do they call it now? The Common Era. Yeah, BCE, but ACE. I don't know. Anyway, I'm just kind of rambling so I can get myself going on there. Good morning, Matt Tyler. Moomin, good morning to you. Thank you for the new thing. I appreciate that. Cliff and his wife both have the V60. How long will they stay relevant without updates? LG claims that they're going to make some. They're going to continue to support the phones. They say it depends on the region how long that might be. So your guess is as good as mine. But hopefully they'll make that more clear as time goes on. Um, Interesting conversations over on Twitter this morning as I got ready for the show. Um, yeah, I know it's lonely on Twitch. I'm sorry. I'm trying to do like multi platforms here. I'm trying to bring all kinds of people to the show. But yeah, we don't really know how long LG is gonna hold out. I mean, but before we get into the LG stuff, let's go ahead and do the beginning of the week announcements as they were. As always, first announcement is thank you once again to our sponsor, Restream, a live streaming service that allows you to stream out to up to 30 different live streaming platforms all at once. They using their sort of online uh window here. That's what I'm using right now because it's just easy. You go to a web page, you put in the title that you want, and you go to the internet. And so they've been sponsoring the channel now for a little bit over a month, and I have really been happy with the service. I am an evangelist now for the Restream, and if you got any kind of live streaming that you want to do, I highly recommend going over there and checking out Restream because yeah, it's there's a free option, but then there's also some paid options if your needs are greater. But Restream.io is where you want to check it out. And my link for my own see if you use my link, that's Restream.io/join/PHT, then they know that I sent you. And that helps me, that helps them, that helps the whole deal. So if you're looking for some live streaming help, Restream.io, that's where you want to go. Anyway, other announcements. Other announcements. Yeah, earlier time slot. You're going to see how this works this week. Just so I can a get to the news a little bit earlier in the day, and B, um, have some more time later in the day to do things. Because I found that like getting done with an hour plus live stream early in the afternoon made it just really hard to get anything significant done. So I'm gonna try that. What are the other announcements? Other announcements. Well, what's going on with PHT this week? Well, this week, of course, we got to talk about LG, and I may make a video about LG. I may make a somewhat pointed criticism, maybe, of the YouTube community as it relates to LG. But I'll get into that a little bit later here as well. Um, yeah, I know there were. I can't. I made notes. I can't find them. Oh my. Yeah, life is just this way sometimes. It's Monday. It's Monday, and so things just don't work. So anyway, oh, I just remembered. I'm pushing channel memberships, and in the interest of like making channel memberships worthwhile, and giving people things that they might want to get from channel memberships, I'm going to do two things. Thing number one, the Friday edition of Painfully Honest Daily will be a members only Q&A show. Okay, so $2 gets you into the members only Q&A show. Memberships, you can click there's a link for memberships down in the description below. But yeah, I'm just gonna, the people who have gone the extra mile and invested in the channel, Q&A stream on Friday for them. And yeah, I'm also gonna give away like one of the problems. I mean, problem is maybe a relative word, but one of the issues that the tech boober YouTuber faces is you get a lot of stuff and you don't have enough room for the stuff. So I'm going to start giving away the stuff that I get from uh, manufacturers to Painfully Honest Tech members. So if membership is an attractive thing to you, if you want to get recognized as a new member, you hit that button now and it'll say, "Hey, new member," and I'll praise you right here on the air. We got Tech Odyssey in the house. Tech Odyssey is another great YouTuber. If you don't check out his stuff, you really should go look for Tech Odyssey on YouTube. He is fantastic. And yeah, so I guess let's just get into it now that I've rambled for 5 minutes or so. Uh, LG. I mean, I feel like we've talked about this almost exclusively for the past several weeks. But the thing is, LG has now finally officially announced that they are no longer going to be in the they're no longer going to be in the smartphone game, which is a bummer, a big time bummer for me, especially, and for a lot of other people, I'm sure. But yeah, they've not been doing very well in the smartphone game here for quite a little bit of time, and now they are leaving the smartphone game entirely. In fact, if I understand correctly, there will be no LG phones released this year, at least not flagship phones. And they're going to be out of the game here within the next, I think by July, they were going to have everything totally shut down. And they do say that they're going to continue to support their phones over however, it depends on the region, but they're going to continue to support their phones. So this is an article from Hype Beast. After losing $4.5 billion over the past 5 years, LG is out of the game. And, just back in CES not long ago, CES, the virtual CES that I didn't pay any attention to. Maybe you did, but I didn't do any of the stuff. They had this rollable phone that was like like kind of like a folding phone, but it rolled out. they had that, and that was rumored. Well, that was supposed to come out this year, and then they announced that that was on hold. They announced that the predecessor or the follow up, yeah, language, the follow up to the V series this year was going on indefinite hold, and we had heard these rumors all over the place that LG was going to step away. I guess they tried to find buyers for either their entire deal or they tried to find buyers for their US market. There was talk of a Vietnamese smartphone company that was talking to LG about buying their smartphone business, at least in North America, and it didn't happen. It didn't happen for whatever reason. I don't know. And so LG is hanging it up. I mean, if you lose $4.5 billion over the course of what is it, 5 years? Is that what they said? Yeah, over the course of the past 5 years. If you lose that much money over the course of 5 years, I guess you could say that you're not doing so well. And Chris says here, like, LG TVs are great. Yeah, I have an LG C9 that I like a ton. It's a great TV. And so LG is a really good company. And LG made really good phones. They had some hiccups along the way that have been much discussed. Uh, the LG G5 had a modular design, and it was kind of a piece of crap. And that kind of the LG G2, 3, and 4 were really well loved, and people were really into them. In fact, I had some people talking to me on in comments saying that they still had their LG G4 or G2, I think, until the screen just totally died. And so they just when the G5 came out, and it wasn't a very good phone. I think there were problems with with the screen, as well as just being kind of not very well put together. I remember Erica Griffin doing a video where she was scraping the paint off of the phone, which is never a good sign. And yeah, so the G5, I think that was one of the phones that had a boot loop issue where I don't know exactly what was happening on the software level, but the phone would just like sort of not boot up. It would just get into this cycle, and then it basically bricked the phone. And there were several models of LG phones around that time that had that problem. Um, but LG did fix that problem. It never reemerged, and that was 2016, I want to say, maybe a little bit earlier. So LG fixed that problem. Never had it happen again. The V series came out around that same time. The V10, which was a really cool and bizarre phone. Not only did it have a high quality headphone jack, but it also, I mean, it had a stainless steel frame with stainless steel rails on the side. Had a little secondary screen that was like a ticker that would show you all your different stuff, and you could use it to quick launch things. It was a really cool phone, and I really liked it. Um, it's and so as time went on, like the V2 kept that little, or the V20 kept that little screen, and then the V30 kind of went to a design that was more like the other smartphones on the market at the time, kind of like rounded off pebble slate design. Um, and LG, now I'm not going to blame I'm not, I have other people that I'm going to blame in this live stream, but LG is not blameless here. LG was not very good at promoting their phones. LG did not uh, LG did not market their phones effectively, which doesn't make any sense to me at all. They do one commercial for one of their things, like one of their phones once a year. And the last one that I remember is a Joseph Gordon-Levitt starring commercial where he was using the V30, I think, and running around and doing all kinds of things. They kind of marketed the phone as like a creator on the go kind of phone, which is what they did with the V series early on. Um, it had, from the V10 to the V20, we went from, not a quad DAC to a quad DAC and a headphone amp, and then they went and kept that headphone jack. I mean, for a major manufacturer, like they they still were the number 4 seller of smartphones in the US in the past year. So for a major smartphone manufacturer in their flagship phones, after everybody else had ditched the headphone jack, and technology is very much a follow the leader kind of game, they stuck with the headphone jack. In fact, they stuck with the headphone jack to the point where they they were like not doing what anybody else was doing. In fact, they went the opposite direction and made it the best headphone jack that you could get on a phone. But they never they never advertised the phone to, I think, the target market for that kind of phone, which would be the audiophiles, the people who love to listen to music, the people who pay for high quality Tidal or any of that kind of stuff. They didn't market the phone as like the audio like aficionados phone for whatever reason. So marketing was bad, and as Michael says down here in his little uh comment, the second part was LG was never very good at supporting their phones with timely software updates, whether that be timely updates for the operating system, which is the one that you can see and you get all excited about, but also like the security updates were often delayed, and that's somewhat of a bigger deal, especially if you're using the phone for business. And those are the things that LG didn't do well. Like here's a story for me from trying to connect with LG and get in touch with them about doing more with covering their stuff. Um, I went to CES 2020 and I went to the LG. They had some companies have like a little booth, some companies have like a giant room all to themselves. Samsung, LG, they just have a giant space all to themselves and stuff spread out all over the place. So I went to the LG smartphone section and I was trying to figure out who worked there, and it looked like volunteers. After I didn't really find anybody to talk to there, I decided to go out to the front. They had like a little lobby area vestibule, and I went up to the help desk that they had, and I asked the young fellow that was behind the help desk. I was like, "Do you have anybody from marketing or PR that works with social media folks and that I could talk to? I cover LG phones a lot. I'd love to speak to somebody about doing more." And he got this really quizzical look on his face, like he had never heard a question like that before, and said, "No, I don't think we do." So LG is not blameless in this situation by any stretch of the imagination. They could have done some things better. But I am going to call out the not just the YouTube community, but the community of tech smartphone coverage at large, whether that be the blogs, the online magazines, the tech YouTubers. I said the other day that when it comes to smartphones, tech YouTubers have really driven the bus when it comes to making smartphones uh, one of the well, continuing the push for smartphones as one of the top technologies, one of the driving forces in technology over the past 10 years. And there's a lot of tech YouTubers who've been out there doing this tech YouTube thing for quite a long time, and they've built huge successful channels off of it. And what I noticed as the smartphone market started to contract, right? And it became more about Samsung and Apple, and Google was interesting for a while and that kind of thing. What I noticed was, other than, myself and Juan Bagnell and Tech Odyssey, who's been covering LG, and also somebody mentioned Jay Williams, uh, and none of us are huge YouTubers by any stretch of the imagination. But the last time I saw a large YouTube channel, like a multi-million subscriber YouTube channel, cover an LG phone. And I don't keep a database of who covers what phone. So I could be wrong here, but the last time I remember seeing a review personally was MKBHD doing a review of the G8. And now the G8 was not an inspiring phone. It was not like it was not pushing the envelope by any stretch of the imagination, but by all reports and my own experience with the G8 was that it was a perfectly serviceable phone. It had its really good qualities. It had a lot of things going for it, but it wasn't part of the Samsung Apple battle for supremacy. And the tone of his the tone of his review, if you could even call it a review, was somewhat dismissive, and the outcome of it was that you were made to think that this was a total, like, piece of garbage phone. Maybe I would feel I haven't watched the video since it came out, but I remember being really angry because he was being so dismissive of the phone, and I felt like now I've talked to Marquez before. He is a really great guy, and this is not an attack on him personally, but I was disappointed with the way that he covered that phone because he just seemed to dismiss it, and there was no risk involved for him to really, like, kinda slag it on the few things that weren't great about it. And when you're Marquez Brownlee and you have the ability, not the abi when you have the I guess, audience that he has, the breadth of his influence on the smartphone game, you can sink or swim. You can just, like, totally torpedo a product, maybe without even realizing that that's what's gonna happen, but totally torpedo a product, and in some cases, like, an entire an entire company out of the water. And I felt like once he sort of had his say on the G8 a couple of years ago, I never again. Now Flossie Carter, another person who covers the V series phones, and or not just the LG phones, and I love that. I mean, one thing I love many things about Flossie Carter, but one thing I love about Floss is that he covers everything, and he does everything that he can to be totally objective about what he's covering, and so he'll tell you if a phone has, some places here and there, and that aren't quite up to snuff, but I mean, as big as Floss is, he doesn't have the reach that Marquez or Lou from Unbox Therapy or any of the people who like are in the 5 to 10s of millions of viewers. And the thing is, when you now this sort of leaks out to the whole rest of the YouTube community, I feel like, because when you're a smaller YouTube channel and you're trying to break into the smartphone market with your coverage, and you see who is talking about what phones, and the biggest smartphone reviewer on the planet has just torpedoed a phone, like, that was to me like one of the nails in the coffin for LG. And I agree with Danny that the G8 was an underrated phone. It really hit all the spots. It's kind of like the V60 this year. The V60 was a monster phone. It didn't have the 120 hertz. You know, it didn't have a quad HD screen, but at the same time, it was powerful. It had a huge battery. You had the dual screen case that you could get with the phone and use. I mean, there was a lot of stuff that was really, really valuable about the V60, and then the G8X, the which also had the dual screen attachment. I used both. I have the LG Velvet, And the Velvet was kind of like, to me, a mid-tier phone, and I when the Velvet came out, I kinda saw the writing on the wall because the Velvet to me was, okay, we're gonna step back one level in terms of the system on a chip that we use. They would go for the from the 8 series to the 7 series of the Qualcomm chip, and while it was a great looking phone, it just didn't have the same kinda snap and power of something like the V60. So, this is one of those things that I think is gonna it's gonna haunt the smartphone industry for a long time because without LG in the marketplace, and LG is LG isn't like a little dinky, like, sort of startup. LG is a major competitor, especially a major competitor for Samsung, right? So Samsung is now, like, pretty much unchallenged in Korea, right? I don't know what other smartphone manufacturers there are in Korea that don't make it out to the rest of the world, but Samsung, if LG steps out of that market, Samsung has just pretty much won. And, some people so Mr. Marcus here says LG wouldn't bring the briefcase. Now, the thing is, having had a conversation about this specific topic, I know that Marquez. I can only speak for him because he's the only person. Well, not the only person, but we had this very specific conversation about whether or not companies approach him to pay him to do this, that, or the other thing, and he says that he has never taken money for doing any kind of review, anything like that. And I don't I believe him on that level. However, I think when you get into doing this YouTube thing or any kind of something like this, I think when you get to this place, you build relationships with companies, right? You build relationships with the people that work in the companies. And when you start to build those relationships, I do think that they have the potential to color your viewpoint of that company and its products. Now, I don't know what Marquez's relationship with LG was on a day-to-day or month-to-month or year-to-year basis. I don't know that. I mean, they sent they had this habit of, and I don't know if they still do it. For a few years, they were sending larger YouTube channels birthday cakes that had like that had a caricature of the person like sitting on top of the cake or something like that. And so Marquez a couple of times posted the cake that LG had sent him for his birthday, and I always thought that was a little bit weird. Maybe I was just jealous, but no, I really did think that it was weird that a company that you're supposed to be covering objectively, right, is like providing you with a birthday cake. And then there was the whole he had one of those LG like wallpaper TVs. And I guess for one reason or another, the mount failed and it fell to the ground, and that was a super expensive TV. And so he kind of called them out for that. I don't remember all the details, so I won't speak to it too much. But what what happens with me when I see this, and again, knowing having had a conversation with him about this particular thing, his coverage of LG is as much, sort of tilted the one way as his coverage of OnePlus has been the other. Like when he called the I think it was the OnePlus 7 2 years ago, or the OnePlus 7 Pro or T. I don't remember which. He called it the phone of the year. And to me, knowing that Marquez is somebody who, he torpedoed the Razor phone. He just destroyed the first Razor phone because the camera wasn't up to snuff. Now, the camera wasn't up to snuff because of software, and the camera did get fixed to a certain extent later on. And you could sideload the Google APK and use the same software that they use for the Pixel and all that kind of stuff. But Man, he went so hard on the camera of the Razor phone that that phone was dead before anybody else could ever get their hands on it. And that's for better or worse, and maybe he's more aware of it now than he was then. Maybe he understands. I don't know. But the Marquez Brownlee seal of approval is just as great for your product as the Marquez Brownlee sort of thumbs down. And Razer, which I didn't get the Razer, the first Razer phone, but I did get the Razer phone 2, and I loved that phone. I thought it was really, really great. And you know, at the end of the day, yes, the camera wasn't up to snuff. I found that that's the case for a lot of non-Samsung slash Google Android smartphones, is that the cameras aren't quite as good. They're getting better now, but 3 years ago, that wasn't necessarily the case. And when he picked the OnePlus phone as phone of the year in his little thing that he does at the end of every year, I was just like, it was hard for me to really swallow that whole, because those OnePlus phones, when it comes to the camera, suck. That's always been the criticism against OnePlus phones, is that their cameras aren't very good. And at that point, they weren't very good. So for him to pick it as the best phone of the year, knowing how hard he can be on the cameras of other companies and their phones, um, that to me, just, I don't know. It just didn't feel right. But again, I want to make clear that MKBHD and is a human being who does his thing. And I think I saw somebody else, everyone seems to have a favorite. And the thing is, like, I don't think people go into it saying like, oh, my favorite is this, and I'm going to give them preferential treatment. I think people go into it and they're kind of like, they already have their sort of bias. And anybody who thinks that as a reviewer, you can, should, or would approach your reviews without bias, I mean, that's just not possible. You know, I I was drawn to LG phones for in large part because of the V series and their commitment to quality audio with their phones. And I was willing to forgive those phones for being less than inspiring when compared to Apple and Samsung phones in terms of design. I was willing to forgive even the slowness of the software updates and that kind of thing. And so, because that audio component of it was really important to me, and it was important to me that that existed in the smartphone market after everybody else had followed everyone else out the door to, getting rid of the headphone jack, coming out with their own wireless earbuds so that they can make more money, et cetera, et cetera. And and so here we have LG, not blameless in this situation, but what does it mean for the smartphone market as a whole for LG to be gone? And LG is gone. Basically, the what I've read this morning says that there are no phones coming out this year, and by July, that whole arm of the company is going to be shut down. They will continue to support the phones depending on region for an undetermined amount of time, but LG as of today is officially done. And in terms of big companies that compete with Apple and Samsung, I mean, there's really not anybody else at this point. I've been saying for the past year plus that the smartphone market, the smartphone wars are over. And now we're kind of seeing the combatants limping off the battlefield. The smartphone wars are done. Apple and Samsung won. It was, instead of it being about Android and iOS, it just ended up being about who could, you know, Samsung was the only one that kept up with Apple in terms of A, trying to match them in quality, and B, matching them in their dedication to spending a crap ton of money to promote their phones. And it worked, right? Now, see, Fiber Hacker says Samsung is way better than LG, and that is what we might call like your opinion, man. Because I mean, unless you've got another comment that you're typing right now telling me why, that's like a totally subjective thing that you're saying that doesn't really stand up. Because LG was significantly better than Samsung in some other ways. Let's not forget, LG was the first to put an ultra wide, like a super ultra wide camera lens on the back of a phone. They were first to have 3 camera lenses on the back of the phone. They really did push the industry forward. They never got credit. They never saw any kind of result in sales, unfortunately. But LG really did push the market forward. They came up with a lot of new stuff that hadn't been on the table before they did it. And so I think you have to give credit where credit is due to a company. Thank you. Thank you for getting my joke, Ryan. Um, you have to give credit where credit is due to a company that, even though they weren't pushing the envelope in terms of their design, they weren't, up there in terms of sales, they were losing money hand over fist year over year over year. Even though that was the case, they were still innovating in the marketplace. And Samsung and now Apple as well are benefiting from oh yeah, they were the first to quad HD as well, right? So the phone manufacturers who have now like become 1 and 2 in the smartphone war, and get to divide up the rest of the marketplace for themselves. Like, those companies benefited from LG pushing the envelope and trying different things. And I think that's worth recognizing, because LG, I don't know. I mean, you look at LG, you look at it now, 3 years down the road. I mean, to me, 2017 was the turning point in the smartphone wars, right? 2017 is when Apple came out with the iPhone 10, and Samsung had built themselves up to be kind of on par quality wise in terms of build quality and other things with Apple. And Samsung also had the additional ability to tout the things that Android has over iOS, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it's not worth getting in an argument over the benefits of iOS versus Android. That's not really what we're talking about here. But at the end of the day, like, where we are left right now is with the two of them sort of owning the marketplace. Samsung had an unpacked event for an A series phone last week. Uh, I mean, Samsung, like, they've got soup to nuts, cheap, middle cheap, expensive, really expensive. They've got phones up and down the scope, right? And then Apple now with the SE phones, and then the 10R, the 11, the 12, all the way up through the Pro and the Pro Max phones. Apple has a phone that everybody can buy. So they have expanded what they have to offer to the point where thinking about going for a different phone than those two, and I'm talking mostly about the North American market, because the other markets in the world, because of the companies that are situated there, because of so many other different aspects, other parts of the world are A, not very well known to me, and B, so different that it's hard to compare them with this. But if you walk into a carrier store in North America and you're faced with 5 different iPhones that you can buy at 5 different price points, and then you're faced with 5 different Samsung phones that you can buy at 5 different price points. And then you're faced with like 2 LG phones that are like somewhere in the middle price wise. And then, you got Motorola maybe has a phone in there. It's gotten pretty bleak. And of course, Google has done a better job of getting their phones into prime real estate when it comes to seeing what's on in stock or on display at the carrier stores. And at this point, there's not much that's gonna stop Apple and Samsung. Now, that's not to say that there aren't good smartphone manufacturers out there, right? There are great smartphone manufacturers out there. I saw somebody talk about Huawei. I saw somebody talking. Then there's Xiaomi, and Poco is a company that a lot of people like, and we've got Google. There are a lot of companies making a wide variety of phones, and Sony is something that people have been mentioning Sony to me a lot more since this LG going out of the smartphone business goes away. Sony has been something that people have been asking me about a little bit more. And to me, unfortunately, for whatever reason, and if somebody knows, please tell me, Sony has, oh yeah, OnePlus. So, that tells you how much I really think about OnePlus. Anyway, um, if somebody can tell me why Sony has not put their phones in U.S. carrier stores, then please do, because I don't understand. There, by all accounts, Sony makes really good phones. I would have loved to have seen what was it, the $2,000 business phone that they just came out with. I would have loved to have seen that. One thing that people brought up in terms of why LG was not successful, or their success was not as as much as it maybe could or should have been, is that we were having this conversation a little bit on Twitter before the show. Uh, Not enough coverage by tech YouTubers. We talked about the big guys, but a lot of the small guys didn't cover it. And the conventional wisdom being there are no views in LG. Like why would you cover an LG phone? Nobody's going to watch those videos because nobody cares about LG. And that's kind of a chicken and the egg kind of argument, right? LG makes good phones. And I remember a time when LG was worthy of views back in the day. But I don't know if it's because the bigger YouTubers stopped covering LG phones, or if it's just you're going for maximum impact if you're trying to grow your channel. I don't know. I mean, of course, that's a consideration that you have to put into effect when you're thinking about doing a video, is like, well, what is the audience out there? Is there an audience out there for these phones, and are there views for coverage of this phone? And Moomin is mentioning TCL. TCL is they made really good phones last year at really impressive prices. I mean, they had a 5G phone that was under $500. They had the 10L, was a great phone, and that was $250. And then they had so they made some really good phones, and they've got some phones coming this year as well. I mean, they made a big push at CES last year and got a lot of people paying attention to their phones. So I think that TCL is going to remain a player in this game. However, it's just one of those situations where TCL knows what segment of the market is there for them to capitalize on. They're not making $1,000 flagship phones. They're making quality phones at a price point, halfway to that point and lower. But yeah, right now, You can kiss the headphone jack on a smartphone goodbye forever. I know that Sony has headphone jacks, but they're nowhere near the quality of the headphone jack that you could get on an LG V series and then later G series phone. The quad DAC technology was as good as you could get until you bought yourself like a purpose built DAC to use with your headphones. Um, Aditya brings up something here. Most of the tech YouTubers go behind views and not practicality. Otherwise, we would have seen videos like why you should buy the iPhone 11 in 2021 from the MKBHDs of the world. Yes, that is true. I mean, the one thing that the smaller YouTuber has in their favor is the fact that they have to find places to get views and think about things, you know, in in the spaces in between the big coverage. Like, yes, you're going to cover the iPhone 12, but I've made videos. I know my friend Travis MCP has made videos about like what is the value of last year's phone or used phones from the Amazon Renewed program, et cetera, et cetera. What are the value of those phones when compared to the new flagship phones? And I think that's a conversation that's going to be more and more worth having at this point. And the big YouTubers are not gonna have those conversations because they're up there, they're macro. There's such a huge demand for their time and their airspace, right? That they are not gonna go, more than a couple of levels deep on a phone anymore. And so that's the opportunity for a lot of smaller that's the opportunity for a lot of smaller channels that are trying to grow. And Tech Rant says the funny thing is that headphone jacks are only on mid-range phones and below. Yes, and that's true. That's true. I mean, I think there are a couple of reasons for that. I mean, unfortunately, I remember doing a listening test against the Samsung. I think it was like the 10, like the S10 versus the Pixel 3a. And I just went back and forth and kind of listened to the two. And even though Samsung didn't tout their headphone jack as being high quality, um, the Samsung headphone jack was a much better quality headphone jack than the Pixel. And of course, all of these parts are are just, they're off the shelf parts. So you're buying at different price points. So clearly the 3A is a much less expensive phone. So they're picking off of a different shelf than Samsung is. But there the mid-range phones do have the headphone jacks, and one I think there are two reasons why. And the one is that, you know, they can offer that feature, but I think one of the reasons that they want to offer that feature is that the majority of people who will buy a mid-range phone are not out there rocking the AirPods. They're not out there spending 200, 250, 300, $450 on a set of on a set of headphones. They're using the headphones that come in the box. They're buying the headphones that you can get, like the Panasonics that you can get for $10 on Amazon, which are amazing. So that's like the market for the mid-range phone is a market that still values the headphone jack. The consumers of higher end phones, flagship phones, the consumers of flagship phones have allowed themselves to be manipulated away from high quality audio into this whole the new thing is the best thing, right? And when Apple took away the headphone jack in 2017 and they, hashtag courage, they made it seem like, I mean, their whole pitch was this is an ancient technology that can't be good anymore. And so we're gonna go better. When we all, in hindsight, I think we could all look back and say that what Apple did was they created they they created a problem that they themselves already planned to fix, right? Because they bought Beats, and several months later they got rid of the headphone jack, and then later on that year, they brought out the AirPods. And the AirPods are a great product. And the AirPods did take wireless headphones a long way, right? They wireless headphones were nowhere near as reliable or as easy to use before the AirPods. And a lot of a lot of companies have now, you know, reverse engineered, not necessarily exactly what the AirPods do, but reverse engineered the way that ease of use works. And I mean, now companies like Soundcore and others make great wireless earbuds, right? So and that is the headphone market right now. However, I think that not enough people just like took a moment and said, hold on, they're telling us that this is an inferior technology. What is their angle? Because the iPhone is the progeny of the iPod. And the iPod was the device that really changed technology and changed entertainment in such a significant way. I mean, you don't see format changes in how people consume media very often. I mean, it went from LP, and then there was cassette, and then, oh, well, before that there was 8-track, and then cassette, then CD, and then digital music, which Apple didn't create, but they were one of the first companies to actually, take advantage of the opportunity to make money off of digital music. And the iPod was a change agent. So whenever you take away the thing that made the iPod possible, then you know that something else is coming. And LG was the only company that didn't capitulate to that, and unfortunately for them, tacitly said, we can we can have a better um, we can have a better audio experience with this better, higher quality headphone jack than you're going to be able to get when you use any kind of wireless headphones. Now, Bluetooth, in terms of Bluetooth audio, has come a long way. However, the experience of Bluetooth audio 99% of the time, unless you're really spending the money, and even then it's still like you're running the audio through a copier, because you have two different levels of digital processing. So it's convenient, it's new, it's forward thinking, it's moving in a different direction. It will eventually, the technology will improve to the point where, the difference between wired and wireless will probably be, insignificant. In fact, it might already be there for the majority of people that use those headphones, right? And I myself, it's much easier to throw a pair of earbuds into my ears and go out and go for a walk, or well, I don't, mow the lawn, whatever, than it is to wire yourself up to your device, and then you get it caught, and your device flies someplace and the headphones get yanked out of your ear. I'm not gonna try and say that wireless headphones more um, aren't more convenient, and by virtue of that, aren't a better experience. However, yeah, and Michael sort of reiterates that. He says, none of this is about quality; it's about convenience. Smartphones are the best cameras, media consumption, internet browsing, multitasking, etc. Um, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that, like, there's an old saying in photography: the best camera that you can have is the one that you have in your hand or in your pocket. And I think smartphone cameras bear that out. Nobody nobody is buying a point and shoot camera anymore. You don't see anybody like going out and with a $300 point and shoot camera and taking photos. No, everybody's got a camera that's some level of quality on their phone, and that's what they're using. And I think that's great. I think that the potential for smartphone cameras is fantastic. I think that what they've been able to do with smartphone cameras is amazing. But I think that also, like, internet and stuff like that is like, internet browsing is best on a smartphone because it's right there in your hand, in your pocket, and whatever, and the thing is, like, internet browsing is better on an iPad, or better on a laptop, or those kinds of things. But a lot of you don't have a laptop or an iPad in your pocket. So smartphones are the do everything device. And now we just find ourselves in this place where smartphones until the next iteration of whatever comes around, smartphones have become like the do all thing. Now, Massimo asked me earlier today about the Samsung Galaxy Fold 3 and when we're going to see that and what is that going to be. There's talk that the Samsung Galaxy Fold 3 is maybe coming in August or September, and it's going to have some kind of like stylus support, a la the Tab 7 or the Note phones, which then leads you to the question of, like, have we seen the last of the Notes? But then again, we hear that the Notes are still out there, still, there's going to be another one in 2022. Yeah, 2022. So it's, yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, I think that the flagship smartphone market is contracting in the same way that, from fewer companies. I think the smartphone flagship market is contracting to all of these things, like Deepak mentions here that his 12 Pro Max in Pro Raw is like rivaling his Sony RX100, which is a point and shoot camera that costs over $1,000, right? So so there's a lot of stuff going on that, is going to make it that much more. Um, it's going to make it that much more of a replacement for so many other things. I just hate to see high quality audio go by the wayside as that continues to occur. Um, and as Sir Dave says, as we said before, LG is not blameless in this. LG made, they didn't market. They didn't update their software at an appropriate schedule. I don't know what was behind those things, but they also, I mean, I guess it's easy to look at this like you look at cars. There were a lot of great car companies back in the day when the automobile market was still somewhat wide open. Talking about, like, the 50s, the 40s, that kind of era, post World War II. The automobile market was still competitive, but those days are long gone. And now we have, I mean, think about how many major automotive companies have gone by the wayside in the past 20 years. So now we have, in terms of US manufacturers, we've got General Motors, we've got Ford, and we could count Chrysler, but Chrysler's owned by a European company, right? So there's this is what we're seeing with smartphones. This is what we're seeing in the smartphone market, is this contraction to where the two most successful companies will have the majority of that market. It's become less competitive, right? There's actually, like, very little competition available in the smartphone market, which 3 years ago you couldn't have said that. You could have said, like, well, we don't know who's going to come out on top. Google's coming out with a phone. Maybe Google's going to, like, take over the whole game. I don't think anybody is making a video or talking about or writing an article about who is going to knock Samsung or Apple off of their pedestal. It's just not going to happen now. It's over, right? And so I think that's I think that, this is a day that we will look back on as smartphone enthusiasts and recognize that it was the day that we could really say that competition in the smartphone market ended, even though it ended, you know, way before this. This was the day that you could write in the book saying it's over. And I mean, David David says here LG started putting out crap phones with features no one wanted or needed at a bad price point, and that's why they're out of the game today. But again, to me, that's like a totally subjective. That's a totally subjective point of view in the sense that LG, instead of doing exactly the same thing as everybody else, and maybe to their detriment, LG decided to focus on things that were either not part of other companies' plans or had been left behind by other companies. Or when I look at what they did with the dual screen phone, the dual screen cases, and then the LG Wing, instead of a $1,500, a $2,000 foldable phone, they made an option that was half that price. And if I'm an investor, right? If I'm an investor and I see LG trying to come in and undercut the competition by giving another option of what you could potentially buy and get some of the same functionality, I'm saying, well, if people are driven by their wallets, then it's quite possible that dual screen case thing is going to be really, really um, attractive. However, people who consider price when buying a smartphone do not consider um, do not consider $1,000 phone. So $1,000 phone versus a $2,000 phone for the person that's going to buy that phone. If the $1,000 phone isn't as cool as the $2,000 phone, then the $1,000 phone is not going to going to be a non-issue. So that's what we ended up having here with LG. LG tried to find their niche. They tried to find little pockets that they could settle into with features that nobody else was offering. And unfortunately, I mean, because they didn't market and because they didn't support their devices, then they ended up not being able to realize the potential that those phones had for being what they could have been. They could have been market disruptors. They could have been a situation where, Samsung could have ended up looking really bad for putting out a phone that is barely functional and incredibly fragile for $2,000, when here's LG putting out a rock solid version of that phone that is not quite as ambitious, but provides like 80% of the same kind of functionality. That wasn't the narrative that ended up happening. I mean, I was disgusted with Samsung and the way that they handled the release of the first Fold. But I took tons of heat for saying that I was disgusted by how they handled that thing. And I was honestly surprised when they decided to sell it at all, but they did, and now they're selling it again. And Samsung has the wherewithal to be able to sell the Fold at a loss for probably as long as they want to. They are bound and determined to make the folding phone the next thing in phones. They are bound and determined to do it. They've got all the investment in the research and everything that comes up to it right here, that they're not going to let it go. And as soon as Samsung comes up with like a $1,200 folding phone, then I think there might be an argument. But at the same time, I'm of the firm belief that while folding phones are interesting, they're novel, they're cool, they are not the next thing. Um, they're a stepping stone toward the next thing. But at the end of the day, that's Samsung. Samsung has won the right to keep pushing the fold. I mean, I thought the wing was a really cool idea. I have a wing that they sent me that, like, do I even review it now? Do I even review the wing? Uh, I, I don't know. It's a very interesting phone, and again, it's an interesting addition to this conversation of okay, if we're talking a different form factor, what are we really talking about? And how can a different form factor be interpreted? And LG kind of pushed that envelope a little bit. Unfortunately, it was a little bit too late, and they still had the same problems that they had before. You know, we can say shame on the tech community for not doing their due diligence and covering LG phones because, if as a tech reviewer on YouTube, you are in some way or another a journalist, right? Then doesn't it behoove you to consider coverage of the competition other than what is really popular? I would say yes, but then again, I mean, tech YouTubers are also independent contractors. So they have to go to where the money is. And if you've got guaranteed views in Samsung and Apple, and you've got to work hard and sort of build the audience for videos about LG or something other that's not like the most popular thing, then a lot of people won't do it. So I don't know. I don't know. At the end of the day, we have yeah, it's kind of a bummer of a moment, although we knew it was coming. And yeah, another in other news, another bummer moment. It's 27 years since Kurt Cobain passed away. Um, and 27 is an interesting number because he was 27, and there are many other people who passed away at the age of 27 who were just at the beginning of their careers. So this is a day of kind of uh, recognizing unfulfilled potential. We've got a $5 super chat here from Michael. $5. Do influencers who point at old LG boot loop problems ever mention that Samsung exploding batteries, HTC booed out of the market, LG the same? The thing is, the boot loop problem was more widespread, for one thing. And the problem with the Samsung phones, I mean, I can't remember the exact number, but I think it was like less than 20 phones actually exploded. Considering how many phones they were sending out, you couple that with Samsung's reaction to the situation. From a PR standpoint, Samsung's reaction to the Note 7 situation was textbook. It was textbook. You recognize the problem, you come out and you admit the problem, you communicate, you do what's necessary, you recall the phones. They ended up having to do it twice, but they did it by the book. And that's not to say that LG didn't do what was necessary with the boot loop problem. The thing is, LG actually was the only company that was offering a 2-year manufacturer warranty for every phone that they released after that happened, right? But they, but these are people had invested in these phones. They'd been using them. They were relying on them, and then all of a sudden, this, which was a much more widespread issue, happened, and that's gonna leave a bad taste in the mouth of people, as opposed to like the Note 7, which, yeah, it was a bummer, and yeah, the Note 7 was a pretty cool phone in the week or two that everybody got to use it, but it never, like, it never took money out of people's pockets, you know? So it's hard to compare the two. HTC, I mean, HTC got booed out of the marketplace. I don't know. I mean, HTC put out some pretty uninspired phones that didn't really penetrate at all toward the end of their time, and then they got bought by Google. And in 2017, Google basically bought the important parts of the HTC operation, and now they're gone. I mean, Nokia gone, BlackBerry gone. Like, this is the way that things go. One of these days, it's going to be Apple, it's going to be Samsung, they're going to be gone, and it's going to be somebody else. But at this point, we have now reached the end of the smartphone gold rush. The smartphone gold rush is officially over today. Without LG in the marketplace, another multinational corporation that can compete in every market, Samsung and Apple have an open road. Yeah, MKBHD never I don't remember MKBHD ever reviewing any LG phone after the G8. And to me, that's to me that's especially because the V60 with the dual screen, that to me is like a cool new way to approach this, multi-screen thing. And it was met with crickets by the larger creators on YouTube in the smartphone review space. And I think it's like there are two reasons for that. One, for a couple of years now, smartphones have been much less interesting than they used to be. And so I really don't think, outside of Samsung and Apple, that there's a clamor for smartphone content. And that does bear some weight. But at the end of the day, I didn't know that he reviewed the Velvet. I can only imagine. I'll have to go watch that. I'll have to go to watch that before I say anything. But I think if you look at the larger content creators, I mean, how often does Unbox Lou talk about smartphones as compared to a couple of years ago, a few years ago? How often does Marquez cover smartphones as compared to a few years ago? The smartphone gold rush started to slow down in 2017, and now we're just seeing it come to the natural conclusion. The companies that found the biggest veins of gold are winning, and they have won now. So, and as Dave makes a good point here, smart people are keeping smartphones for longer, upgrading less. And the thing is, part of that has to do with the fact that there's not, in the early days of Android, if you bought an Android phone, it was almost necessary to buy the next year's Android phone, because the Android phone that you bought the previous year could barely run the software that it had at that time. So if there's a new version of the software, that phone is almost out to pasture. So Android improved, their phones improved year over year over year. And it was much more of an important thing to keep upgrading Android phones. And iPhones were kind of the same. They got bigger, they got more choices, they got more features, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, iPhones are a different thing altogether, because iPhones are supported for up to 5 years, if not more. And so people hang on to iPhones for different reasons. Samsung and Apple are the only two companies that figured out how to get people to buy phones year after year, even if they didn't need one. And so Apple has the yearly upgrade plan. Samsung came up with something similar. Samsung offers absolutely insane trade-in values for phones. Like, when a Samsung phone comes out of the box, it already just like lost 25% of its value. But a year later, Samsung is still giving people like more money than the phones are worth to trade in to get the new ones. And I think that's made a big deal for them because it doesn't matter if they're making money. It doesn't matter if they're overpaying for those phones. They are moving units every year. And even if it's through somewhat artificial means, you look at the numbers and you see Samsung and Apple moving units. LG loses $4.5 billion over 4 years. And yeah. So that's they've played the game better, more successfully. They've taken the opportunities that they built for themselves, and they've capitalized on those opportunities. And now it's a Samsung and Apple world. So there will always be other companies out there, especially selling Android phones, and they will likely be good phones, and they will likely serve people well. But there's tell me if I'm wrong, but there's no phone, there's nothing that's going to challenge Apple or Samsung in terms of like knocking them off the pedestal of 1 and 2. And again, this is my view from a North American standpoint. I know that in other parts of the world, there are companies that are still competing, but Huawei's been having trouble with all kinds of different things, and it just seems like the road has widened for those two companies to continue their success. But anyway, this is going to be the end of today's. I'm making myself depressed. No, this is going to be the end of today's Painfully Honest Daily. I'm going to get myself into a few other things and try and get some work done today. And I'm trying to keep these things around an hour just so people don't get overstressed or, feel like they have to extend their lunch break or whatever. But I did want to talk about this today. I saw this in the news this morning and I was super, super bummed out, even though I knew, like, there were reports last week that today would be the day that they announced that they were out. Still, seeing the news was a drag. And it's just going to serve to make the smartphone industry much less interesting once again. And I think, J-Rod's making a good point. Most people don't understand why they don't like LG phones. And it's social proof. It's, you don't see anybody with an LG phone. You see everybody with a Samsung or an iPhone or whatever. And it's social proof. Like, oh, they must be the best phones because everybody has them, right? LG phones must suck because I never see them. It's, the social proof fallacy. But anyway, thank you for being here today, folks. I really do appreciate it. I will be back again tomorrow to talk about something else, probably, unless there's more LG news, but I doubt it. We'll find something to talk about. Appreciate you guys being here today. Once this is week 2 of the daily stuff. If you got feedback, if you want to hit me up on Twitter. Find Painfully Honest Tech. You'll just find me. Hit me up anywhere and talk to me about whatever it is that you want to talk about. Give me some feedback on the live show. And until tomorrow, once again, my name is Jason. This is Painfully Honest Tech. So honest.